today's winter work presentation section of today's activities. So we'll be having Curtis and Palmer be presenting their experiences at their freshman year boatyard. We'll have Carissa and Juliet be presenting their experiences aboard their ship, as well as Spencer aboard his ship. And lastly, we'll be having Andre be presenting his experiences at everywhere he's been so far. So join me in welcoming Curtis and Palmer to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Palmer.
I'm Curtis, and we went to Brooklyn Boatyard. So I was interested in going to Brooklyn Boatyard because I'm interested in passenger vessels, so it's a great experience to learn about the detail that goes into making these vessels both functional and comfortable for passengers.
And I went to Brooklyn because I like wooden boats.
So we both happen to be from Minneapolis, Minnesota, so to get there after our winter break, we took a road trip across Canada and over to Maine. So along the way, we stopped at Fincantieri Marinette Marine, which is where 3 of our classmates, Joseph, Kaysen, and Caleb, spent their winter work. So they worked aboard the vessel you see behind us here. So now, a little about Brooklyn Boatyard. It's a pretty small wooden boatyard with about 60 employees, and they build about 1 to 3 new-build wooden yachts per year. They also, a large part of their business is repairing and maintaining a fleet of about 150 wooden yachts owned by a variety of different people. So a lot of their work is bringing those in and out of the water, storing them, and doing maintenance on them.
Yeah, so a couple of things that they have at the yard. Like Curtis mentioned, it's a full-service boatyard. They deal mostly with pleasure craft, motor yachts, sailing yachts. Population of Brooklyn triples in the summer, so it's a lot of service for vacation goers. But they do some commercial work. When we were out there, the harbor or the kind of bay that they service had one commercial scallop boat out, and when we were there, they took this lobster boat in and out. But it's full service wood shop. They've got really an incredible selection of planers and joiners and table saws, band saws, anything and everything you could want. I mean, full industrial equipment. It was really quite amazing. But more than that, there were some really great people. The lobster boat you see in the corner belonged to our boss. He had us over for dinner and kind of showed us his personal projects and kind of just what life was like around there up in kind of rural Maine. And it was really great. And all the people that we worked with were like that. And it was really special.
So this is their main building. This is where all of their new build projects and the largest repair projects occur. And then behind it, you can see the harbor. So this is where in the summer, all of the boats are, which is supposed to be really beautiful and would be really fun to see at some point. The really interesting part is Maine has a really large tidal range. So with their largest yachts, they sometimes have issues getting them in and out of the water and have to time it just right. They also have a variety of storage sheds. So once they bring some of the vessels out of the water, they have a truck driver who tows them all around the town to the different facilities that they've got. Some of them are heated, some of them are not. So during the winter, the ones that are heated, like the one you see in the photo here, is where some of the maintenance occurs. So we spent a decent amount of time on some of these vessels, repairing the decking and a variety of other things.
Yeah, so this is the inside of the main shop. It's where they do most of their, well, all the new build stuff, and a lot of the big restoration projects are done in here. It's 3 floors, so the main floor and then 2 mezzanines, plus I guess another 4th floor where the engineering offices are. It's a big building, and it actually used to be a sardine cannery. It was repurposed in I think the 60s when Joel White started the yard. It was actually E.B. White's son, so the guy who wrote Charlotte's Web, which is kind of fun. But yeah, it's a full-size shop. In this picture you can see the lobster boat that we were working on. From the 40s, a bunch of restoration work being done, and a new 56-foot cruising boat that I believe they launched this past July.
So a few jobs that we did, we kind of got to see the entire life cycle of teak decking. So we installed teak deck on one vessel, sanded it down on another, repaired the caulking on a third one, and a couple of other things with that. We also, to get Lady Claire, the lobster boat, into the main hall, we removed a portion of the 3rd level of the shop, which was interesting. And then when we weren't doing other jobs, we did little tasks like sweeping and bringing trash and stuff. Another really interesting one was there was a vessel that they were planning to build, but it got put on hold owner had planned to build 2 identical vessels, so they bought all of the equipment, like the Seakeeper, the galley equipment, the lighting, everything, and for both vessels at once. And the second one wasn't getting built, so we moved all of that, including the jig work and everything, into the back of the truck. So this is us here with the Seakeeper.
Yeah, so another thing that we spent a fair amount of time working on was composites. I didn't realize this going into it, but a lot of, especially the new build boats that Brooklyn does, they do a lot of work with composites, either wood epoxy composite or carbon or glass composites with foam core, carbon core, honeycomb core, kind of runs the gamut. But this particular piece that we worked on, we got to see more or less the whole process from making the mold to laying out the cloth, laying out the foam, and then more cloth, and then the infusion and the bagging process, which you see here. So this was for the companionway slider on the 56-foot cruising boat.
So this is the boat that the companionway eventually went on top of, but first the cabin top had to land on it, which was one of the larger operations we saw while we were there. This got built at a separate facility and then brought down the hill and landed on top. They did a bunch of CAD work to make sure it fit perfectly, and it was a very fast process. So this vessel was pretty interesting, as it was built for a couple who was into water sports, so it has a lot of large lockers for a dive compressor and surfboards and a few other water toys.
Yeah, so the other boats that we spent a lot of time working on were 2 47-foot day sailors called Iris and Lark. Brooklyn has built a series of these Agamogan 47s, and Iris had been sold to a new owner who I believe was going to go race her on Lake Michigan, but he needed stanchions for the regattas he wanted to do. The original owner didn't want stanchions, and so we kind of copied the stanchion spacing and built stanchion support blocks based off of Lark. Similar boat, slightly different interior, and so we spent a fair amount of time on that project and also just redoing the decking on both of them. So this is actually just after the anchor locker in Iris. They had this enclosed space that was rather moldy, and so we cleaned this out, and then this is actually where some of the blocks went. A lot of the other blocks went back under the cockpit lockers, so we spent a lot of time in tight spaces, kind of trying to measure and craning your neck and that sort of thing.
So we kind of had to slide in and out of these lockers a couple times and get the blocks then marked off and cut into the different shapes around the supports that were already there. The hull wasn't thick enough for the stanchions to go directly in them, which is why we had to add these blocks. And then after we got the blocks in place, we found the same locations on the deck, were given a drill, and drilled through. Thankfully, all of them did get onto the blocks, so everything was good and well supported. Then we glued all those stanchions in place, and it was good to go.
Yeah, between the work, we did do some fun stuff. We went to Portland, Maine, which was fun. We went past Liberty, Maine, and we stopped at Liberty Tool. If you're ever in Liberty, Maine, you have to go. It's awesome. We went past BIW in Bath. We also went to the Maritime Museum in Bath, which you absolutely also should go to. It's the site of the old Percy and Smalls Yard, where this vessel here, the schooner Wyoming, was built. She is the largest wooden vessel ever built. Spectacular. It's an awesome museum. You should absolutely go if you're in Bath.
We were also right near Acadia National Park, which was a great place that we did a couple weekends, do some hikes in the winter snow, which was really fun.
So the other boat that we spent a lot of time working on was a lobster boat from the 40s by the name of Lady Claire. Long story short, she had been out in the hard on and off for years and years. The owners had taken her somewhere to get work done, took her to Hinckley. The people at Hinckley didn't know what they were doing. They screwed her up even more. So she got brought to Brooklyn to get everything fixed and do everything properly. Surveyor said she needed a new keel, and so we knocked out the old keel, got $20,000 worth of green white oak timbers, and put a new keel together. So that was an exciting project.
So on the left here you can see our boss Eric, who is cutting out the old keel. Unfortunately, it wasn't as rotted as they thought, so it probably was actually fine, but we still had to replace it because it had gotten cut out at this point. So then on the right here, you can see all the wood that was going into building the new keel. So one of the later projects we were given was to figure out the bolt placement to hold all of these 4 massive timbers together. So near the shaft line, we had to calculate the angle for which not to hit the shaft line, because that would make the propeller not be able to go, and also not have the bolt miss the last timber. So we very carefully figured out the angle and built a jig to drill through that, and everything worked great.
Yeah, so this was Lady Clara when we left. I hear that she has a keel now. I sure hope she does. But yeah, it was a fun project and cool to work on an old, proper plank on frame boat. It was a lot of fun.
And then after we got all the keel together, we were given the task of creating a drawing of all the different joints and bolts so that it could be given to the Coast Guard and other agencies for certification that the vessel was safe to operate. And now we're happy to take any questions. Thank you for your time.
Just how cold,
Okay, go ahead. Sorry. Say it again.
how cold was it?
Not that cold. I think, I don't know, maybe 15 at night. It was the coldest it got. It wasn't terrible.
We're both from Minnesota, so for us, not bad.
Do you have a number of other students that, again, told you about this boatyard, or did you all do the research yourself? How did you, I know you said that you wanted to do this type of work, but what led you specifically?
Sure, so the school has connections with a number of different yards around the country. Brooklyn and Rybovich are the two yards that do wooden boats. Rybovich is down in, I think, Fort Lauderdale, somewhere in South Florida. And Brooklyn's up in Maine, and I didn't want to go to Florida. So that kind of left Brooklyn as the place that I wanted to go. But it is partially that, and we actually met, when we were there, we met somebody who had kind of forged the contact initially about 10 years ago. And so it's a mixture of both.
So the school provides the class with a list of available spots, and then as a class, we decide who's going where, essentially.
What were your living arrangements while you were there? Did you have your own house to live in?
We found an Airbnb like 30 minutes away, and it worked great. So we figured that out ourselves.
What time did the sun set?
It was about 3:30 when we first got there in early January, which was kind of rough. But by the end, it was like 4:30 or 5. It's kind of way far out at the end of the time zone.
Thank you.
Give us 1 second, we're just looking for the presentation. Hello everyone, my name is Carissa Nieves and I'm Juliet Schaefer, and we're juniors, and this is our presentation about our sea term aboard the USNS Supply last winter. Our agenda for today, we're going to be talking about our ship, the USNS Supply, some of the jobs we performed, our work environment, some special experiences we had, and end with some questions. So our ship, the USNS Supply, is a TAOE-6, which is an MSC auxiliary oiler and explosive ship. Its main purpose is to deploy with the Navy fleet and perform underway replenishments with literally anything that they may need. It's a really important job. We were stationed at Norfolk Naval Base, quote, welded at the pier for 5 weeks. The ship was under a voyage repair period. It got pretty beat up when it was last deployed, so there's a lot to learn from all the things that needed to be fixed, but we didn't get to go anywhere. And that's okay, we made the most of our experience. We were the only 2 cadets on board out of a crew of about 100, being the only female cadets they've had in over 5 years. And being the only female pairing in our class to go on ship, we tend to call this term she term. We hold that dear in our hearts.
Alright, so one of our most interesting jobs we did was performing testing and making sure everything worked after it finished its last deployment and when it was in a shipyard for a while, so we're just making sure the shipyard didn't break anything. So in this video, you can see us testing the gas turbine. We were in charge of checking if there were any sparks going on. I hope I didn't see any, but the ship is running, so luckily it worked great. We also got to spend a lot of time with the deck department. We followed them on inspections with the sprinkler system and all of the cargo holds. We tested the filtration system with some contractors and also saw the Burton rigs, which is in charge of bringing the cargo on our ship and across. So very vital systems that we were able to get a really in-depth view of. And then one of our more common tasks was joining engineers on just routine inspections like the boiler, generator, and evaporator, which is a perfect segue into our next responsibility of repairs. So in this first video, you can see the evaporator I mentioned. I don't think the water is supposed to do that. So we got very familiar with the mop as Chris and I cleaned it up. It turns out a gasket had blown, so one of our big solo tasks was creating a new gasket from the measurements we were given and installing it on our own. And successfully, the leak stopped. I don't have a video of it working, so you'll have to trust me on that one. We also got to follow an engineer checking the boiler, making sure nothing was broken, and then kind of replacing things that maybe the shipyard didn't do a great job with, which we also found another leak. Luckily, it was just a small oil leak. We tightened a screw, and it was much easier to fix than the evaporator. The coolest repair we did was on the oil purifier in this last picture. We were sent on a wild goose chase to find various tools and repair manuals and anything we might have needed, and it was a great experience to see how the engineers complete their tasks from sourcing materials and looking at what actually needs to be fixed in the manuals, and proved to be very helpful throughout our C-term project. We also performed, I'm sure all of you are familiar with this in one way or another, but grunt work, like the sweeping and mopping up from the evaporator. In this first picture, you can see Carissa underneath the gas turbine. We were charged with cleaning out the module, so cleaning all the soot out. I don't think we saw the sun that day. We were in the engine room for hours cleaning that out. We also did tank soundings, which are just running around the ship like a maze, measuring things in different tanks. Did get lost a few times, but it worked out okay. We turned a lot of valves, did fire watch, which is just making sure the person who's welding, nothing catches on fire. Nothing did, but it's always fun to observe that. And then get in plenty of small spaces, which in this last picture was a little small.
Never the exhaust. That was pretty cool. We looked up and it was the sky. So, we also climbed up a few too many ladders with a few too many tools in our hands. Our work environment was really amazing. We worked under our chief engineer and first engineer, who was actually the first acting female chief that MSC has ever had, so that was really inspiring to work under her, and we learned a lot from both of them. The crew as a whole, especially the engineering department, were extremely knowledgeable and friendly. They just wanted our ship experience to be the best learning experience that we could get, and especially since we didn't go out to sea, they felt really bad and just tried to give us as much as they could. So they started the gas turbines for us. That was that video that she showed you. And we started up the SSD, the ship surface diesel generators, and we got to see a lot go on, and they really did try to make it the best experience, and it was really helpful for our C-term project. And every single person, because we always asked, like, what do you like most about this ship, or do you like your job? It was a big one. And one of the, like, everyone said they loved it. It was the best ship they've ever worked on. And our favorite quote was, "This ship is a beast," and we totally saw that firsthand. It would have been cool to see an underwear replenishment, though.
We saw videos, so we'll use our imagination. So even though we were welded at the pier, we did take advantage of that by having some special experiences, such as going on some ship tours for ships that were also unfortunately stuck at the pier. One of this was the USS Gravely, which was a destroyer on the same pier as us. We got a very detailed tour of the auxiliary spaces and main engine room, and one of the coolest things we saw was the 5-inch gun on the front of the ship. We actually went inside and climbed up to the top, and someone was kind of describing how it worked. I was only allowed to take one picture, which is this right up in the corner. We couldn't take out our phones at any other point, so you'll just have to trust me on everything I'm telling you right now. We also got a tour of the Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier, which is very different, going from an extremely small destroyer to a bigger than you can imagine aircraft carrier. So we only saw a few auxiliary spaces and some of the workshops. Of course, there's more restrictions just because of the nature of the ship. But there was a little museum dedicated to the namesake, and at the end of our tour, you can see this lovely picture of Carissa and I out on the flight deck. It had snowed that week, so we got to see a lovely view of all the ships and the port with all the snow. It was beautiful. It was just a really good experience of seeing a variety of ships. Like normally when you're on ship and at sea turn, you're stuck on the ocean and you kind of only get very familiar with your ship. So it was a very valuable experience to be able to compare what we see every day working to other ships and what their systems might operate as.
We also had some special experiences because we were at Norfolk Naval Base. We were with 8 of our classmates. They were also at the same base. So we have Aiden, Dom, and Julian. They were just 6 piers down. We would walk to each other and hang out quite a lot. If you have great eyesight, you can see our friends Alex and McGregor. They're on their chain layer, and they were also right next to their ship, 6 piers down. So we got to see our friends quite a lot. We were all stuck at the pier as well, so we got to hang out. And we also got to see the seniors. They were working at Carter Rock in Virginia Beach, and so we saw them. We also went to an alumni meetup and got to meet alumni we had graduated when we were freshmen, and also new ones, and it was just a great reminder that literally anywhere we go, we will find Webbies that will house us and hang out with us. So it really was a great experience, and I enjoyed it with you, Julia. It was great.
I'm glad.
Thank you so much.
Do you guys have any questions? Are there any questions? Yes, we're up front.
How do you decide which ship you're going to, and do you know where the ship is going?
So the question was, how do we decide what ship we go on to, and what was the second part?
Do you know where the ship is
Do
going?
we know where the ship is going? Well, right after we got off ship, they actually took a nice trip to the Mediterranean. So, unfortunately, we got to see our cargo mates and all of them, their pictures in the Mediterranean, but I'm glad they had fun while we were here. So it's a similar situation with the freshmen where we get our coordinator reaches out to different companies, and most of us go on MSD. They have the most spots available for us, and we can do really good work with them. But Spencer will talk later, and he went on a different company. But there's somewhere you apply to. It's just we get a long list of ships, and we're like, all right, I guess we'll duke it out as a class and figure out who goes where.
Yeah, we don't know which ship we're going on. We just applied it. We applied to MSC, and MSC put us on a ship that could take us and have the room. So we didn't really know until maybe a week before we hopped on what ship we were going on, or where we were going, or if we were going anywhere, which the answer was no. But it was still good.
And in the back?
Did you have to get security clearance?
The question was, did we have to get security clearance? Not for our ship, since if we were working on a destroyer, yes. We did have to get our TWIC cards and our Merchant Mariner credentials, which every sophomore is going to have to do before they go on ship. So that was what got us on the base. And we also got CAT cards when we got on ship, and that allowed us to go on and off base. So we, somewhat, but not really.
All right, any other questions? Oh, one more. Yes.
Did you say you didn't know where you were going until about a week before?
We knew we were with MSC and we knew we'd be on a ship, but at least for our class there was a little bit of delay in finding out what specific ship we would be on. So we knew we had a ship we would be able to go to. We just weren't too sure what base or what location that would be. So I think it was 1 week might be a bit of an exaggeration. It was probably like 2 or 3.
But also they paid for it. They arranged our travel. So that's when I say a week. I think we got where we were flying to, and they sent us our ticket and everything. That was MSC. That was our experience with that specific company, and I don't think that was the same for all the other ones. I mean, Spencer will talk about his, but if they didn't pay for if they didn't deal with our travel arrangements, that would have been way more stressful. But no, it worked out.
Yeah. Anyone else? Great.
Thank you so much.
right, good afternoon. My name is Spencer Rankin, and today I'm going to be talking to you about my time aboard American Freedom this past winter. A bit about me, I'm originally from Toronto, Canada. I love to sail, and I was good at physics in high school, so I thought Webb would be a great place to pursue those passions. At Webb, I'm the co-captain of the offshore sailing team, and with Jack, I run a coffee club. Today I'm going to talk about what American Freedom is, the daily tasks I performed aboard her, what it was like to live on a ship, and some of the highlights of my trip, and I'll finish off with what I learned. American Freedom is a 600-foot product tanker, and that means that she can carry anything from crude oil to highly refined jet fuel. She's owned by American Petroleum Tankers, which is a subsidiary of the oil giant Kinder Morgan, but she's operated by Crowley, which is a ship operating company. While I was on the board, there's about a 20-person crew, and I did a 47-day stint. American Freedom is a Hyundai designed ship, and she was built in Philly Shipyard in 2016. And in the grand scheme of shipping, 600 feet is actually pretty small, but we burn 25 metric tons of fuel a day, so that gives you some perspective on her size. While I was aboard, we were sailing from Cherry Point, which is just south of the Canadian border. We picked up fuel at a British petroleum refinery, and we sailed down 3 days to San Francisco, stopping at Richmond and Martinez. And we did that 4 times. It was about a 10-day trip on average back and forth. On a ship, the structure of the engine room is that you have the chief engineer, first, second, and third, and then 20 feet below that, there's me. So my daily tasks consisted of following the third engineer around, primarily, and helping him out. A lot of this is just constant maintenance, like cleaning strainers that prevent stuff from getting in systems and blocking them. And then there's preventative maintenance, like oil changes. So we have humongous engines that ran our hydraulic systems. We did oil changes on that a few times, as well as our lifeboat to make sure it was in working order. On the left here is an oil filter for one of our gen sets that we also cleaned out. They say to never be good at a bad job, but I was really good at making labels, so I did that a lot. We would pump sludge from the bilge. It was nasty stuff, and we'd burn it so that it didn't go into the water. We would service pumps. Here is the impeller on one of our pumps, and the pump had been vibrating, and there was a lot of wear on it, so you can see some cavitation evidence around it there. And then we also changed up the bearing and fixed the vibrations. Whenever you're going close to land, you need to have people in your engine room in case something goes wrong. So you always have to have 2 people there that's maneuvering. And before you go into a port, you need to do a steering gear test to make sure that your rudder still works. When I wasn't helping the third or any of the other engineers, I was working on my C-term project. So this is one of various drawings I made of my C-term project, and it's a machinery arrangement for the second deck. So every morning, I would walk down these stairs and walk into the engine control room here, and we'd figure out what we were going to do for the day. The crew on American Freedom were unionized. We worked 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. with 2 unionized coffee breaks that didn't involve coffee. We had an hour and a half of lunch. The food was edible, and I wouldn't say much more. 3-day sails, we never encountered super rough weather. On the right is the worst we encountered, but a lot of the time we were in a ballasted condition, so we'd be rolling pretty quickly and it could get uncomfortable. And that was my stateroom. Not glamorous, but it gets the job done. So now I'm going to talk about some of my favorite highlights from the trip. The first being breaking in the rescue boat. No, we didn't have to rescue anyone. When I arrived, we swapped the outboard on the rescue boat because the old manufacturer was out of business and we need to be able to service it so that it's always functional. Once we installed it, we needed to break in the engine, and I was voluntold to be the ballast on the rescue boat. So I got this really sick photo. The unfortunate thing is the davits for rescue boats are notoriously unreliable, so when we were going back up onto the ship, I was lifted 5 feet in the air, and then we waited for 20 minutes, and then we got lifted the next 30 feet. Also, while I was on board, an MAN superintendent came to check out the engine. So we got to open up the crankcase, see what was inside, and we checked the alignment between what the computer system thought the engine was at and where it was actually aligned in terms of if it was at the top dead center. And this was an awesome experience. It exemplifies why we go on ships. If we're going to be designing ships and sizing engines, we better know what they look like. So I was very lucky to get to see this. After we opened up the crankcase, the superintendent plugged in his USB stick, it calibrated the engines, and he played Sudoku for the next 3 days. I got to go off ship while I was on board, which is pretty irregular these days because our port calls are very short. We can pump a lot of fuel in under 10 hours. But there is a ship inspection report program audit where they check your safety so that ship owners and operators can understand the quality of their fleet. And I was told by the chief engineer, I don't want to see your face, please leave. So I got to go into San Francisco with the other cadet. We got to buy an extremely expensive coffee. We got to walk Lombard Street, which is a famous curvy street, go to a bakery that only makes focaccia bread, and got tacos in Richmond on our way back. And of course, it's the beautiful San Francisco Bridge. So learnings, number one, ships are cool. Life at sea is definitely tough. While I was on board, I had Starlink internet and I could call my family, but you're not getting Amazon one-day shipping. You're out there on your own. And I was only on for 47 days, but a lot of guys were out there for 90 days, and on international ships, the standard is 120 days. So it can be a difficult experience. As a designer at Webb, you gotta think about designing for easy maintenance, because often what's easiest for me to design is gonna screw the loser that has to fix it. And I think you should have some compassion for them. So, for instance, we had the gap to the lowest part of the engine room. There was a gap so that you could lift things out and service them on the main deck of the engine room. And it was only about this big. So if you were in heavy seas, you wouldn't be able to lift a pump and service it because you'd be rolling too much. So things like that you need to think about as a designer. And finally, I think you can really get along with anyone if you're locked in a box for 3 months. So with that, I'd like to thank Webb and Crowley for this experience and ask if you have any questions.
So is it common for Webbies to, it seems like the other two went in pairs, so you went alone, but was there another student?
There was another cadet that went to Mass Maritime. I didn't know if there would be another one. Normally people like to go in pairs. I knew that I really wanted to go out to sea, so this opportunity came up, and I guessed that I'd have internet and be able to call my family.
Did you think about taking the Jack and Spencer Coffee Club?
People were more fond of Monster drinks than coffee aboard. So. Thanks for your time.
All right.
Got it.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I will probably go until 2 p.m., so any soccer players in the audience, feel free to get up and leave whenever you need. I won't be offended. Where are my parents of freshmen? Raise a hand. All right. Parents of sophomores. Okay. Parents of juniors. All right, a little less. And any parents of seniors? All right, I recognize those ones. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andre Klima. I am a senior here at Webb. and today I will be discussing my approach to making the most of the undergraduate experience, the time period that I call the critical years. So, we come to Webb to become professionals. And what does that mean? Well, in our ethics class in senior fall, we're told that professionals act with autonomy and responsibility, and in some cases carry a legal license. So I've been thinking, how does one become a professional? When I go back home to Maryland and meet with high schoolers and middle schoolers, when they talk about going pro, they often talk about becoming a professional athlete. And I think there's a few things from that sort of development that we can apply to engineering. Tiger Woods started playing golf at 2 years old. LeBron James started playing basketball at 9 years old. And a lot of my high school classmates that are currently on Division I teams were on travel teams and had personal trainers and were devoted to their sports from a very young age. And we can take the same sort of approach to engineering. And I've broken it down into 4 steps that I think are good for development. So the first step is to inspire young. The next step is to develop talent. The next step is integrate in the community. And then finally, you'll develop as a professional. The important part here is to have continuity throughout your youth development experience. So I'm going to discuss how I had continuity from before Webb through where I am now. In 2014, I was in 6th grade at the age of 11 years old. At this time, I found out about Webb Institute and the U.S. Naval Sea Cadet Corps, 2 seemingly unrelated things, but here's how they connect. Webb Institute teaches naval architecture and marine engineering. They provide the education. That's great. The U.S. Naval Sea Cadet Corps is the Navy's junior program. And what it's really good at doing is exposing young people to a variety of career paths. So what I was able to do is I was able to see how naval architecture and marine engineering could be applied to the U.S. Navy, both in uniform careers and Navy civilian careers. So that gave me the sort of outlook that I wanted to get to. So from 2017 to 2021, I went to boarding school at Groton School in northern Massachusetts. And I took the overall liberal arts prep school education and tailored it to be more STEM focused. So that's my timeline pre-Webb. Now we come to Webb. And I'd like to start with orientation week. In my orientation week, Dean Werner gave all of us an index card and he asked us 2 questions. And I think Dean Werner's index card exercise was the single most important moment of orientation week. The first question is, why are you at Webb? This question is so important because if your answer is anything but the education, it's really important to reset that. Webb is for the education. It is so difficult to get through here. There are so many late nights. It's like going to the gym. There's a lot of days where you wake up and you're like, I do not want to do this. Absolutely not. But you understand that after 4 years, there will be noticeable differences. The second question is, what is one thing that you will do to reach your objective? And each student needs to make that own decision. Why are you here, and what are you going to do? I have my index card from orientation week here. Here are my responses. I'm at Webb to graduate with superior knowledge and be a part of the NUPOC program. For those not familiar with NUPOC, NUPOC is the Navy's Nuclear Propulsion Officer Candidate Program, where they take engineering students from civilian colleges and put them on active duty for the remainder of their undergraduate time, and then commission them as nuclear officers. My response to the second question: to reach my objective, I will work before play, and I will not have any games on my academic or business devices. To this day, I have not had any games on my cell phone, my iPad, or my laptop, all 3 of which are at my desk daily. So with my objectives set and my constraints defined, I embarked to freshman year. As a freshman, I went to General Dynamics Electric Boat for my freshman shipyard term. This was an excellent fit because as someone who wanted to be a nuclear officer, understanding submarine design and construction was very important. When I returned to Webb for spring semester of my freshman year, I took a week of skips and went to Washington, D.C. to attend the Sea Air Space Symposium. While I was at Sea Air Space, I joined the Naval Submarine League to work on the integrate in the community stage of my 4-step plan. Also, while in DC, I worked on formulating a military sea term. Webb can organize commercial sea terms, But as someone who wanted to go into the service, I wanted a military sea term. So that was going to require a little bit of extra effort. So it required a lot of extra effort. I actually had to cold call many different officers between the Navy and Coast Guard. And that's another thing to bring up. It's very important to be good at cold calling and cold emailing. And freshmen, you'll do the freshman phone-a-thon in the spring, so you'll get some practice with that. But it's definitely something you want to develop and work on because it will turn out to be very important. So thankfully, the Navy and the Coast Guard agreed to sponsor me for a gap year. So between my freshman year and my sophomore year, I took a year off. I did my sea term on 2 different Coast Guard cutters. On the left is Coast Guard cutter James Rankin. It is a 175-foot coastal buoy tender. While I was on the James Rankin, I worked on aids to navigation operations in the Chesapeake Bay, and I worked on the deployment qualifications in order to go on the big ship pictured on the right. The vessel pictured on the right is Coast Guard cutter Polar Star. It is the nation's only operational heavy icebreaker. I was a main propulsion cadet on this vessel, as well as an ice navigation consultant. I was on board for a 5-month deployment from November 2022 through April 2023. We started out in Seattle and transited down the Pacific, stopping in Hawaii and Australia, before spending 2 months doing icebreaking operations in Antarctica. After Antarctica, we went up through the Atlantic, crossed through the Straits of Magellan and the Patagonian Channel, and went back to Seattle. When I returned to the United States, I worked at the U.S. National Ice Center, a Navy Meteorology and Oceanography command. They had me take the navigation work that I had done on Polar Star and present it at the International Ice Charting Working Group. Now, as someone who had only done freshman year at Webb, this felt like presenting a senior thesis with only 1 year of college education, but nevertheless, I got through it. While I was at the Naval Ice Center, I was also given the opportunity to tour the U.S. Coast Guard Yard in Baltimore, Maryland. While I was there, I asked them if I could come for an internship the following winter. Working this far ahead is a theme that comes back. When working with US government internships, especially those that require security clearances, it's important to be about 12 months ahead. So I was usually preparing 1 or 2 internships ahead of the internship I was in or going into. So I went back to Webb for sophomore year and worked as a junior naval architect at the Coast Guard Yard. And even here, I kept up with the continuity of icebreaker operations. I worked on structural modifications for the medium icebreaker Healy and structural analysis for the special purpose craft Ice Rescue Transport. Keeping the Coast Guard and polar operations work going even further, I went back to the Coast Guard's component of the North American Ice Service, the International Ice Patrol. Here I did similar work that I had done with the Navy. I worked as an ice navigation consultant and redid some of their navigation products. When I came back for the fall of my junior year, I took another week of skips, that's becoming a trend, and I went to the International Ice Charting Working Group Conference at Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey. This was a good development because the first time I took the week of skips, I was just going to a conference as an attendee. As a junior, I was now taking a week of skips to go to a conference as a presenter. So this was good to demonstrate to the Webb faculty, my mentors, and my external sponsors that I was having development and growth in my undergraduate experience. However, I was getting pretty focused on the US Coast Guard. And the index card very clearly says NUPOC program, which is Navy. But my reorientation to the Navy actually starts in sophomore year. In the fall of my sophomore year, Portsmouth Naval Shipyard came to this auditorium to recruit for WinterWorks. I submitted my application and didn't hear back at all. At the last week of my sophomore winter work, so February of my sophomore winter work, they reached back and said, here's a job offer. And so I took it. It needed the full 11 months in order to process the nuclear access clearance for the nuclear propulsion program. So it was very important that I applied 14 months in advance of that winter work because the background check and security clearance paperwork takes that long. So I was very fortunate to be accepted as a nuclear engineering technician at Portsmouth Naval Shipyard for my junior year winter work. This was actually the perfect setup to apply for the NUPOC program because working at Portsmouth Naval Shipyard allowed me to understand nuclear operations from the operator perspective of the actual submarine crews, the engineering duty officer perspective of the engineers who work in the shipyard, and the perspective of Naval Reactors, which is the office that oversees all of nuclear propulsion. So in the later part of my junior winter work, I submitted my formal application to the NUPOC program. And then I came back to Webb and went through some technical interviews over the phone. I was then asked to take a week of skips, again, the most recent week-long cut, and I went down to Washington, D.C. I spent 1 week at Naval Reactors headquarters at the Washington Navy Yard, undergoing several technical interviews, ultimately leading to an interview with Admiral William Houston, the director of Naval Reactors. And to my surprise, instead of asking me to go to the fleet as a submarine officer, he asked me to work on his personal staff. So after Webb, I will be working on Admiral Houston's personal staff in Washington, D.C. But I didn't get here overnight. I got here because I was able to demonstrate continuity. My parents and the Sea Cadet Corps inspired me young. Coming to Webb gave me an opportunity to develop my talent. The Navy and the Coast Guard gave me opportunities to integrate into the community. And now Naval Reactors is allowing me to develop as a professional. It's been great to look back on everything that I've been able to do, and I'm very excited to see what all of the rest of the freshmen, sophomores, and juniors will hopefully accomplish. Thank you for your time. I'll now take any questions. Yes, sir.
When you were doing all this trailing back and forth to Monterey, back and forth to DC, did you get the military to pay your way, or did you pay, how'd that work?
No, so I did not enter onto active duty until that interview with Admiral Houston in April. So I've been on active duty naval service since April 17th of this year. Before that, I was relying on external sponsors to pay for all of that. So the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation is a private nonprofit that has a college scholarship program that I've been a part of, and they paid for a lot of the travel.
Excellent, thanks.
Yes, sir.
What are the badges on your uniform?
Sure. The top badge is the Auxiliary Cutterman badge. So part of my Coast Guard deployments involved going in through the Coast Guard Auxiliary, which is their uniformed civilian volunteer forces. So I'm actually one of 20 people with the Auxiliary Cutterman badge because it's very rare for them to let civilians to go on active duty cutter deployments. So to get the Cutterman badge, it requires 2 years of time at sea.
And then below that?
Below that is the Naval Sea Cadet Corps Aviation Badge. So as a cadet in the Naval Sea Cadet Corps, I went through the FAA ground school and received an FAA endorsement to sit for my ground school exam. All right, I'll be happy to take any questions at a later time. Thank you all. Oh yes, President Martini.
Yeah, you were at sea for an extended period. How did you find that? We heard a comment that being at sea for long periods can be difficult. How did you acclimatize?
I thought it was great. Being on the James Rankin was great practice. So I did 1 month on the James Rankin. That was my practice deployment. And that included about a little more than a week underway continuously. And then Polar Star being underway for 5 months. It was a very large crew. The crew size is 150, so much larger than a commercial vessel. So it's kind of like, you know, having a Webb-sized crew underway, which is great. And I had a division that was really good. The main propulsion division was great. And the wardroom community was great. As a midshipman, as an officer candidate, I was put in the wardroom with all of the officers of the vessel. So that was a subset community that I was taken into and developed in. And there were a lot of things that they did to kind of enhance the development experience. So in addition to the normal day-to-day maintenance, we would have junior officer development courses in the wardroom. So they would take all of the midshipmen, the ensigns, and the lieutenant junior grades and have junior officer development courses, sort of how to be an officer and how to lead sailors at sea. And then they would also have Icebreaker University courses where they taught us all about icebreaker operations and the special considerations we needed to have for icebreaking operations. Yes, ma'am.
Did you find that taking a gap year affected the flow of being in college for 4 years? Is that common for kids here to take a gap year?
It's not common, no. I found that it was one of the most important years of my life. Doing that gap year and integrating at 3 different active duty commands basically set the stage for all the other opportunities I had afterwards. The one thing I didn't touch on is I received 2 other job offers in my junior year in addition to NUPOC. I received an offer from the Naval Oceanographic Office and Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. And that Naval Oceanographic Office offer only came because of that gap year. So what had happened, I did the gap year with the U.S. National Ice Center. The commanding officer of the National Ice Center transferred to be the operations officer at Naval Meteorology Command, which hosts the Naval Oceanographic Office. When I went to Naval Postgraduate School in the fall of my junior year, he was actually there at that conference. And he asked me for an update. And I gave him my update of everything I've been doing. He said, I think we may have a job for you. And so he said, apply to the SMART Scholarship, apply to Naval Oceanographic Office. And so I did. And sure enough, I got the position. But really, that just shows the importance of networking. And to all the freshmen in the room, you will learn to develop your network and grow your network. And that is so incredibly important. Go to SNAME meetings, join ASNE, join SNAME, join the Naval Submarine League if you might work for General Dynamics even. It is so important to develop that network because it will pay dividends as the time goes on. So the gap year was absolutely one of the most important years of my life. All right, thank you all.